been out given to understand, Karthik, that India is looking to take UPI to Saudi Arabia, to Bahrain, to other parts of the world. UPI, of course, is a success story here in India. We look at the number of transactions made on UPI. It's an all-time high of the total retail transaction. Almost 1/3 are made on UPI. So after meeting with success largely on its shores, India is now hoping to expand UPI, expand the infrastructure, and take it to other countries.
You're right, Shweta. I think it's been like COVID. UPI is also a great digital success story
Great story
for
there.
India, right?
Absolutely.
But I mean, not keeping the security concerns, in mind here and delinking it from the COVID story. I think thus far UPI has been an error-free success story, and I think there has been no reason whatsoever to complain. It's a simple interface. It is very convenient. It is available on practically every smartphone. You can link it in exactly 2 steps to your bank account and make payments, to anybody who has a bank account in India. Now the story gets internationalized, and in fact in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, Bhutan was the first country to install UPI and include UPI in its financial system. Thereafter, in 2022, Nepal was the next country to take it on. And that sort of, I think, gave confidence to the National Payments Corporation of India, NPCI, to really look at a global footprint for UPI. And it started this by after Bhutan and Nepal. Earlier this year, Singapore became the first country where Singapore's payment interface along with India's UPI sort of, they had a handshake, and there could be exchange, remittances exchanged and money transfers between Singapore and India done seamlessly using the UPI interface, right? In addition to that, you also had countries like Australia, UK, USA, where there is a huge influx of non-resident Indians, NRIs, who have bank accounts in India but an international mobile number. UPI permitted NRIs to also link their Indian bank accounts with their international phone numbers
right.
to be able to make transactions and remittances to Indians using UPI, right? So that was the next logical step. And now, of course, we have the situation where a great expansion, pretty much like the handshake that happened with Singapore, is likely to happen with Gulf countries, including Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And these, of course, are huge hubs of population, Indian population residing in those areas, right? In fact, a lot of people from Kerala take up construction jobs and oil dwelling jobs and other manufacturing jobs in the Gulf. And a major source of, let's say, Kerala's economy is foreign remittances. So it really opens up a great possibility for Indians living abroad in these Gulf countries to be able to make remittances back to their hometowns and their families in India using UPI.
Okay. Let's bring in Rakesh into the conversation. Rakesh, from what appears to me after Bhutan and Singapore, there is now an attempt made to get Gulf countries and Indians residing in Gulf countries make their life easy, ensure that remittances are now done through UPI, which is relatively safer and easier to use as opposed to your traditional banking methods.
It's an interesting development and it's on expected lines. And what is most important here is to point out that Government of India in the recent past has repeatedly said that we look at UPI and the entire digital public infrastructure goods as an export from India, but export without a monetary and a commercial consideration. So this is basically what we call, deep drive economic diplomacy without a direct economic benefit, but it is bringing and building the Indian influence in these waters. So if it's free and Government of India is not charging for this service to be, so to say, adopted by many more countries, right now, Bhutan, Nepal, as Karthik rightly mentioned, now the Middle East, I do see many more countries looking at this opportunity because it's a win-win situation for them because there are no commercial considerations, and it's a win-win situation for India because geopolitically, geo-economically, you're making a very strong statement that we have the technology leadership and we are ready to support these countries in speaking about a paradigm shift in the way their consumers conduct financial transactions. And but doing so, like we mentioned, COVID. I do remember that famous sentiment expressed by our foreign affairs minister when he mentioned that he went to a restaurant in US and along with his son and who works in the US at a think tank, and his son had to produce a long paper, and the external affairs minister of India just showed the phone and said that here is my COVID certificate, so to say, make a very large political and diplomatic statement that India has really arrived. So the moment you increase the stakes and take a service out of your boundaries to other nations, it is incumbent upon the administrators of that service, in this case the government of India, the entire back end, to ensure that these transactions and these are absolutely safe. So I do imagine that we are having a spate of attacks when it comes to our data privacy. The India's most premier institute, AIMS, has been repeatedly hacked. I mean, imagine it has the data of all our parliamentarians and ministers and key personalities. Similarly, COVID has all that data. So while as we put in a massive effort to expand the universe when it comes to digital public infrastructure goods, we must, as an emergency, I would say, I'm being a little radical here, mount a offensive against the measures which are trying to sabotage India's these apparatuses. And for that, we need to again take course to or recourse to technology. And I'm surprised why have we not been able to build enough safe firewalls to keep these guys at bay.
Okay. Important, of course, to build enough firewalls there, but it's also a commitment made in under India's G20 presidency to export India's public infrastructure, digital infrastructure, to other countries, which is considered to be relatively safe. And linking it back to what you just said, the data leak on COVID does pose some questions there on the merit around trust and how much trust can you put or faith can you put in a system that cannot protect data.
Absolutely right. I mean, as I said, we need to really double up or triple up our effort in, at one level pushing our capability, but simultaneously building capacity to ensure that all our premier institutes, all premier leadership instincts, whether it's UPI, whether it is COVIN, or whether it is any other technology leadership that we have. Here is a bit of a challenge that government of India faces. I mean, not directly related to it, but I don't know what Karthik's views on that. We have been seeking, so to say, control, if not control, a parallel mirroring image of all these, new age social media platforms, from a Telegram to a, Meta and Twitter included in India, so that we have a better sense of, what is happening and how they are navigating your data. So that we have hit a dead end so far. We really went after Twitter, but then I think we clawed back, and we have, so to say, found the middle point. There are some cases in the court as well, because if you don't have an access, if not control, of these parallel platforms, where also there is a huge data, then probably there is lesser opportunity for us to actually be foolproof when it comes to securing our own data.
But Rakesh, if I can just digress a little from the issue of data to this whole business model around UPI, do you find it to be sustainable? UPI continuing to be free, and there was this little hype that came about a couple of weeks back that transactions over 2,000 rupees are going to be charged, but then there's a clarification that the charges will be only on the businesses and not on consumers. But this peer-to-peer transfer, even an NEFT, not NEFT, I think the IMPS also charges you about 5 rupees per transfer. So, in excess of a certain amount. So, do you think there is merit in UPI continuing to be free? And if it continues to be free, what is the sustainability?
Karthik is going to
Well,
make a lot of people angry with that.
No, I'm just curious, because somebody, it's again, it's our tax money which is through the way of the government getting channeled into creation of public goods, and NPCI being one. But then we are talking about a very socialist sort of a mindset here, and at the end of the day, any institution being built has to pay for itself.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
how does it pay for itself?
Couple of a very important point, Karthi, because I think both of us are on the same point. I am not particularly happy with government of India giving all this gratis to other countries. Why should we? I mean, you are giving a service. Every service has a cost, and the citizen technology led framework anywhere in the world, especially in developed economies, is in the hands of private sector, and private sector has made a huge profit out of it. So at one level, at the macro level, there is need for enabling a private sector play into this entire digital infrastructure goods ecosystem, which includes UPI, the fact that you mentioned. How long can government of India continue to subsidize it? And especially for countries outside of India, maybe for its citizens, it can continue to do it for some while. So I think better sense needs to prevail on the government and look at one level, bringing in equal stakeholders from the private sector, creating a huge ecosystem at the back end, especially the startups. Tech startups is India's great strength. Why don't we play that and bring them as stakeholders? मतलब कोई ऐसा मजबूरी नहीं कि हमें सब कुछ गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया को ही करना है. I
Correct.
think they have set the template. Let there be an economic perspective to it. Let there be a charge to it. I don't think you and I, who are using UPI, and anyone who is using it, you can have a tiered approach in terms of the tariffs. But let there be some price for it. It's an excellent service. I mean, now Paytm has started marking. You've done this transaction in 0.04 seconds,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a late convert to this kind of a new system because I'm old school, so I was a little apprehensive. But the ease that it has brought about, any ease in business of life, if I can
Yeah.
use that phrase, must have a charge.
And my fear is, Rakesh, that with the success of UPI, you will have certain international intermediaries like Visa and MasterCard driving out of India or unable to sustain in India over the long run. And then we are talking about yet another monopoly, this time a government-funded monopoly. So it would then be free, perhaps, to charge any rate from consumers or businesses alike. And that is again not going to be great news for the success story of UPI or any such digital public goods platform being built in India.
There are some bright minds advising the government. I'm surprised so far that they have not talked about it. Maybe the first cut is that we want to build that hegemony or the what we call tech thought leadership arising and emanating from India. At second level, once the elections are due and then the next government comes, whichever government comes, they must look at both for domestic market and as for international market, creating a price point for it. I mean, there are no free lunches. I mean, we know this very, very fundamental economics principle, whether it's in the government hands or in the private hand, there should be no exploitation. And my other fear, Karthik, is that, if we don't invest adequately in this infrastructure and at the same time keep on expanding the universe, there is bound to be a pressure on, the quality of service.
Right.
Okay. I'm not a spokesperson of the government, but I have to say this. The idea for example, when we spoke to, respective authorities from ONDC as well, which is a relatively cheaper platform, because we had the chief business officer here on the show saying that we don't want to charge, A, we're not a profit-making entity, B, we are hoping that this will ensure more competition. So you're right on the point where you have private players who are disadvantaged because you have a government public infrastructure which is charging you very, very little, and a Swiggy and a Zomato are feeling threatened suddenly. But the idea that the best survives also stands true. So if there is enough competition in the market, you have private entities who are also hoping to compete with digital public infrastructure and ensure that there is more competitive pricing. So and also to where we are at the moment, Karthik, I understand that the penetration of services is very low. So you have, and we may feel that everybody is using UPI on the surface of it, but how many people do actually know how to operate a UPI? How many people have access to internet?
1/3 of the population.
1/3 of the population, but there is
Definitely, if
enough.
not more.
Yes, but there is enough room for more. So maybe, perhaps, and I don't know what the ideology here is or what the intention is to make it free of cost at this point in time, but maybe at a point later on, when there is enough penetration and greater than what we have at the moment, government will start charging. But you're right there. But by that time, private entities will be losing out of their chunk of business and may be forced to be driven out of India.
Sure. So my only response to your very, very thought through statement on these not being profitable or profit making by virtue of their memorandum, these are not profit making institutions. But at the same time, these should not be loss-making institutions as well, because who bears the loss? The loss goes like it used to happen in the 1990s, early 2000s with the Indian Railways, while it continued to happen with Air India all along. Who bears the losses that these institutions make? The taxpayers, right? So don't make profits, definitely don't make supernormal profits, but you need to make enough operating profits to continue investing in technology and bettering the product. So that is, I think, business needs to be done without, whether you're in the business of making profits or not, and government is definitely not in the business of making profit, but it needs to be done not at the cost of making losses and sustained losses. Because technology is obviously expensive. It takes a huge amount of server space, linkages, API calls to banks, real time, a lot of transmission of data, data protection, security, a lot of information riding on the platform requires technology, requires servers, requires data centers, and all this costs money. So are taxes offsetting those expenses
Losses,
the only option, and then if those losses continue to mount, you're making compromises on account of money that can be invested in other growth engines rather than feeding loss-making institutions.
You know, I agree. Absolutely. I mean, free market economics, of course, you cannot have losses mounting. There cannot be business if it's only making losses. There has to be profit. But where we are at the moment, and we're at a cusp of technology revolution. We keep talking about these UPI transactions. We take a lot of pride in the fact that from a rickshaw vendor to a rickshaw puller to a sabzi vendor, all of them are using UPI. My understanding of this is that once it gets to a point where more and more people are a part of the infrastructure, using the technology, it makes sense for the government to either privatize it or you know, start increasing their charges gradually. So it's to come to a point where you have more people who are using
as long as
tech.
that is on the roadmap, I think we are on the same page.
Of course.